All right. So thanks everyone for attending, and thanks Tom for getting on the phone. I haven't heard from Jenny, but we can follow up with her in a little bit. Okay. Yeah, you're really.
Email saying that she only takes report of president, but she hasn't gotten on. So maybe she'll not get on at all, but I think she'll get on.
Okay. Well, other people who are interested but can't make it or may win from the Tulane, who's the community outreach person for the Tulane Environmental Law Clinic, because we're going to be discussing this kind of project with her and other service owners. So that's why we're recording. Today, as far as a rough agenda, I'd like to give, I was going to describe a little bit about what we do in wetlands permits review for like 2 minutes. Mostly, I'd like to give the time for Kate, who's been working on making a map visualization of James and my and other people at GRN's work on compiling the public notices for wetlands permits. And that involves different details in CartoDB and JavaScript. And then at the end, I could talk about some very preliminary kinds of analysis that are apparent just from a very simple map at the very end. So, yeah. I guess, so starting off, at the Gulf Restoration Network is my task to review the Army Corps permits as well as the coastal use permits in the state of Louisiana and in the New Orleans district. Whenever wetlands are impacted, you need a 404 Clean Water Act permit because wetlands clean water. We live at the bottom of the Mississippi River, which is a giant delta, so there are lots and lots of permits. And every year, according to our, from our discussions with the regulators at the Army Corps, they process around 1,500 permits a year. Now, so that says most of these are not publicly noticed, because when we at GRN go to review the public notices to see what's worth commenting on, what's worth knowing about and informing our membership about, we only see about 300 a year. However, that's an incredible amount. And then there's also a parallel program for just the coastal zone in the Delta, reviewing Department of Natural Resources dredge and fill permits. So often a single activity, if it's in the coastal zone, has to get both of these things. And whenever there's a 404 wetlands application, there needs to be a Louisiana Department of Environmental Quality stamp of approval on the Corps permit too. So there's another agency pulled into it. It just takes an incredible amount of time to review this, and I've been doing it for a long time. We've got a lot of service learners from Tulane, and James has been doing it for a very long time too. And so we're working with Tom to kind of streamline that process and automate it. But we thought one of the benefits of all the work we've done over the 2 years, or the future benefits of working with Tom and automating the review process, could be visualization of these wetland permits. And so Kate has graciously taken on a mapping project of work that James and I and others have already done in CartoDB. And so, Kate, do you want to can you put up a map of the website for people to look at? Like very, very basic stuff.
Yeah, this website is not, it's not fancy. It's not about the website, it's more about the map is what I was aiming for.
Okay.
Can you see it?
Yeah. It's loading the map. There's the map, and there's our several layers on the map. Kate, do you want to explain to us, especially for new people, how you came to this map and all the different features in the legend, that kind of thing?
Yeah, definitely. So since it was such a big document or such a big Excel spreadsheet, I figured, and after talking with you, Scott, the best way I thought of to map it was to kind of separate it by impact, which is what we initially talked about. And so I did a choropleth, which is just using the variance of colors to distinguish different things. And so I started out the basic dots here to show, at first I only had the dots to show how much acreage was affected, and then Scott thought it would be interesting to do something to have it differentiated for the pipeline, so that's what these arrows are. And then these are just some links for the data down there. And let's see. And so from there, what we talked about is we thought it would be interesting to be able to kind of filter it down, since it's so much when you look at it. It's kind of like, what am I looking at? There's too many points. And so that's what these little buttons up here are for. And so one is by filter by impact, and so I hope this works right now, but it was a few minutes ago. And so this way people can kind of, you know, if you want to look at just the pipelines, you can look at 10 to 40 acres of pipelines. Okay, good. And so then you just have these orange arrows down there. And with each point, you can click on it, and I tried to customize these info windows to make them look a little nicer. And another thing I added to the Excel sheets was grabbing all these different email addresses. Mm-hmm. And this link, I've had trouble with it, but ideally you'd be able to click on that, and then it'll open whatever Outlook or email program that your computer has, so that you're immediately there so that you can email. So yeah, it doesn't work right now. But the idea behind that was so that you could email whoever the permit supervisor is for that site. And additionally, I added another button by year, because that was another thing we talked about, which would make it easier so you can kind of see which permits are most current. And so these are all of the ones from 2015. There's the most from 2014, definitely. Yeah, so, and underneath it all, there's several layers of the map, and so here is where you can kind of turn things on and off. Like, we can take off all the permits, which I don't know why you'd want to do that, but then you don't have the permits, and you can only see the triangles or just mitigation projects that are existing right now, which is this layer. You can turn that off too. And then what you're left with is just the basin subsegments and the scenic rivers. And so I think this is nice, because that way, if someone, say, turn that off, and someone just wants to see just the permits, and they want to see and then they want to narrow it down a little bit more by, you know, current permits, they can then, it's easier to see which ones are in your area. And so that was kind of my goal, is to make it so, since it was so much data, to just make it so that things were differentiated enough so that someone could look at it and understand what the difference is between the things, and then also allow people to have these buttons to filter it so that it could be more pared down and accessible.
Cool.
And the way I made the map initially in CartoDB, which is great for doing simple things, which I did most of this map in that, but in order to, I don't know where my screen just went. Oh, in order to style it further and add those buttons, I used, the reason it's on this website is so that I could add in JavaScript and HTML, which you can't do in CartoDB just because that's just not what they do. But you're able to use what you've done there and manipulate it with HTML, which is great about it. And so I also have the code on my screen, which is pretty simple, and it's easy for me to send that up. Like, it's easy for me to just send you the code if you guys wanted to put this up on your website. And I don't know, if you have any other questions, let me know.
Well, yeah,
But I think that covers most.
Well, can you zoom?
Most of what.
The request. There's a lot of permits, and the map, as you have it, is very zoomed out. If you maybe zoom in and focus on the southwest area of Louisiana, the Lake Charles area, Do you know that area? Just those, you see where there's those two blue dots and those two orange dots in the southwestern part of the state. If you could frame, zoom in and frame it. A little bit better.
Is that good?
Pull it down a little bit more.
Sure.
Right. So you see, there's. Oh, and could you go to all the permits for all the year?
Yeah. Hopefully that brings us back to the.
Well, I think what I was trying to get you a little closer in, but one of the advantages is you really start to see things when you go a bit closer in. You start to see hot spots. One of the things that I've suspected, having looked at these for a long time, and in the past 3 years, which we have displayed, is that there's a lot of concentrated development in the Westlake area, in particular the liquefied natural gas boom, which is putting a lot of large impacts west of Lake Charles in the Bayou, excuse the pronunciation, a very particular watershed. On this map that Kate has up, you can see that we have Louisiana, and it has these different polygons of various shapes. And when you, if you can click on the word sulfur, Kate, that because of this map, it has that particular watershed in the map layer, so you can see how many orange and red dots are in the watershed. And there's a lot. And there's not a lot of mitigation in this particular watershed, which is signified by the black triangles. And there's not even proposed mitigation in this watershed, which would be the blue dots. There are also the green dots, which are proposed restoration projects. So maybe that is a mitigation project, that green dot in the watershed. I feel like it would be.
No, the green is restoration.
It's restoration. Okay, that's interesting.
And you can see this one's only 5 acres, so
that's interesting.
Or maybe it's 62. The description's different, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if it says Axial Corporation. I wonder if that was proposed as part of a permittee responsible mitigation. But that gets back into the job that James and I have done, along with other people, about whether or not these things are classified. But I guess, just looking at this, you can see a concentrated area of development that DRN or Tulane Environmental Law Clinic or someone might want to focus on as a heavily impacted area, and then you can, use the hydrologic, the water logic, the watershed logic for why concentrating development might be bad for water quality in this area. And the additional layer is the scenic streams. You can see that the Calcasieu is scenic, far upriver from Lake Charles. Under the Clean Water Act, that river is an outstanding natural resource water. It's under Louisiana Scenic Rivers Act. I mean, it's designated a scenic river, which has a lot of additional protections to the character of that water body upriver of the massive industrial development. But I thought that those stream segments were also important to know about in case we look at this map and we see any large wetland developments that would be impacting the watershed around the scenic rivers and our outstanding natural resource waters. So Kate, I guess a question. You were able in CartoDB without a lot of manipulation to display the. We discussed how pipelines were different, and although we were developing all this point data for pipeline impacts, the map of a pipeline and the map might really extend from Beaumont, Texas to St. James Parish, like all the way across the state. So the point is kind of a misrepresentation. So can you explain a little bit about how you can change the symbology in CartoDB? I mean, or just, I don't know, if that's useful to people who might be using.
Do you mean change it from what it is here to represent that more?
Well, I mean, like when we were discussing things, we discussed that there was a need to change the display of certain impacts. And we could do that in CartoDB, right? Just like we have the different colors for the degree of impact, and then we have a whole different symbology for pipelines. Is that,
Okay. So I could sign into my CartoDB account to show you, but basically, let me look at it here. It's not very hard. You can load in different, I think they're called SVG files of different icons. I think the arrow was something that CartoDB had available because you can basically do arrows or dots.
mm-hmm.
But where is it? Yes. But it's something that if you're in CartoDB, would it be easier if I just showed you in my CartoDB account?
If it's available, yeah.
I'd have to like log in and everything, but basically in CartoDB in the CSS section, you can stylize things further, which is how I differentiated the different colors, and that's also how I changed the marker type. And so the arrow was something that CartoDB had available, but I actually have been thinking about loading a new icon with. There's like various different types of downloads that you can do for mapping that are compatible with CartoDB, but it's really easy to add them in.
Okay. I guess as far as the back end for representing these different points with different colors and different shapes, in the database, or in our case a spreadsheet that James and I were creating, you had to add a column, the impact column, and then that column had, I guess, 6 or 7 different designations, which then gives us that legend on the bottom right of the screen.
Yeah, so I added a column, and just based on the type and based on acreage, which as you can see that's in the legend, they're all just straight numbers. I think it was 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
And we did that differently than the mitigation projects in rivets. That's the...
Yeah, the existing mitigation projects were a different file, so I added those were added as their own layer.
Right, and so in the legend that shows up as a thing below. It's a whole different layer.
Yeah, and you can tell when I filter things using these buttons, those kind of just stay the same. Since they're in a different layer, they're not affected by the buttons.
Okay, and the buttons are also using this one column in the database to...
yeah, well, I also added another year column just to simplify that.
Okay, right.
Simplify the date.
Right. Yeah, go Tom.
So, CartoDB and other like web-based JS applications have a lot of the features that you'll expect of desktop JS applications. I haven't really used JS, desktop JS. I don't know as much about the web stuff either. But if you think it should be able to do something, it's probably good reason we can do it in JS on the desktop.
to be a separate layer then for pipelines. So if we had, if we had a line file for all of these pipelines, we could put that in CartoDB, but it would have to be a separate layer, just like we have a separate layer for the black triangles, the existing mitigation projects in Gruzd.
Quick question. So this is taking the database that y'all are putting together, the 404. So this is so theoretically, if we do when we get the scraper up and running, theoretically the scraper could be integrated or periodically imported into this platform. Is that the thought?
Yes.
Okay.
Or something like this.
Mm-hmm.
Tom?
We've already done that in the older version. In fact, the way it worked, we had the initial. Well, some of them depending on like which year it was. Some of them that was reviewed without the scraper, and sometimes without the scraper. So the way it's always been, we do the first pass through the scraper, and then got for the instance or whoever used it, so we can make sure it's correct. I think it's the most important.
Right, but the scraper tries to read a single coordinate for each public notice, and if it can't, then the permit reviewers go in and put that coordinate in. So every public notice for a permit application has a single, well, most of them do, for a particular impact. It has at least a single location point. Yeah, I think Jenny, who's not on the call or the GoToMeeting today, I think she was interested in looking at.
I'm here actually.
Oh, hey, there you are. Okay.
Yeah, I just put myself on mute.
Okay, wonderful. I think, we had discussed about the potential for integrating some visualization into the scraper program, as we did in the first iteration. And I just wanted the chance for everyone to look at this as one example of the kinds of information you would want when you're evaluating wetlands, the kinds of geographic information you want when you're evaluating wetlands permits. Yeah.
Kate, or anybody else, does CartoDB, Tom was saying if you can do something in GS, there's a good chance you can do it in CartoDB. So if we wanted to, I know this would take more time and all that, but if we wanted to have more selection, like I want to see all the permits in a certain basin, is that something that could be done, just like basically a query would have to be run, of all permits within section, segment 0132567. Theoretically, that would be possible on this type of platform. Obviously, you don't have it set up to do that. I'm not asking you to, but I'm just thinking.
Yeah, that could definitely be done.
Yeah.
You would just, because it's part of the database, so basically whatever columns are in the database, you could add a filter for that if you wanted. So you could, it would just, I don't know how to, because there's so many basins, there's so many to choose from, but you could do that. You could have it so that each one is an option, or you could have even just the hotspots as an option.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, you could do that by using the same type of query that I ran for the other ones. Oops.
I see that, currently, trying to think, in the past scraper and in the public notices now, the Army Corps lists what's called a HUC-8. This is an 8-digit hydrologic unit code, or HUC, that the shapes, the polygons look different than these black wireframe polygons that are up on the screen now. They're much bigger, but those are the hydrologic units that the Army Corps uses to determine whether or not mitigation is in the appropriate location. And we've pressed the Army Corps to include that information in the public notice. But right now, James and I don't include that 8-digit number as a specific number in the spreadsheet that we compile, but I do think we could, Tom, make that a part of the scraper. It was in the past. And then once you have that number associated with each public record of each public notice, then it's pretty trivial to use what Kate has done with these drop-down menus, or maybe some other way.
Other query mechanisms.
Yeah.
So I guess that's kind of what I'm trying to hit home is, as this is moving forward, let's make sure that we have all of the fields that we think we might need. Because I would hate to see us get to a point where we have it all done and then we're like, oh shit, I wish we would have had the hucks in there. So I think it's important as we're designing the new scraper and maybe doing a web or a map interface, that we really think hard and make sure that's a priority to figure out that, okay, what are all the things that we need in the database or in the spreadsheet to make this not only useful for us right away, but are there any things that we think we might want depending on the trends that we start seeing?
We're obviously going to do that, but you have to expect that we're going to. So it's not really that hard to add things later, but it's really good.
Yeah, we've made a list, those of us who are working on the scraper project, of the different fields. I think maybe something to think about, though, is the fact that pipelines are an interesting problem, because they're going to, and it's not well represented on this map, unfortunately, but pipelines do cross many, many watersheds. And so then I know that the Corps is going to look at impact per watershed and then try to mitigate in watershed, but they'll probably resort to only 1 or 2 mitigation banks for a pipeline that has impacts across 8 or 9. So as a person who's collecting data, it's important to maybe think about what happens when you have a single permit public notice that might list 8 different hucks. And we should think about that.
Yeah.
Is there one in particular that, I don't know, we should think about that some more. Are there any thoughts about that?
I haven't really thought today, actually. The way this occurred to me was we have many different sorts of locations. We have the coordinate county, we have the county, we have kind of the trail, and we have the hub. Collectively, do something interesting with that, because they're all represented. I represented them all as like geospatial features. So I don't know, maybe the hub that contains maybe where they overlap, like the
Jenny, do you have any thoughts on this kind of issue?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, hey.
Okay, cool. It looks like a lot of different thoughts are being thrown around. I'm not really sure what the, what the central issue is here.
Right. I mean, given that there's a certain hydrologic unit information in the public notice, sometimes a permit might have multiple hydrologic units and affect multiple parishes or counties. Like, are there any thoughts about how to represent that visually? I don't know. Here we've done it one way by just signifying that the point is actually a line, but I don't know if you have any other ideas.
Well, I guess ultimately, what's the most important association between those two? Is it important to show that project is in all of those hucks and to visualize that really obviously, or is that just kind of more? I don't know. To me, it doesn't necessarily seem like that visualizing that here on this map is that compelling. Maybe I'm not understanding fully.
Okay.
Okay, now that I realize what I'm trying to do, the way that the whole system works is the automated trade, and then it goes to the website, and then we can edit data to the website. And once, regardless of whether it's been traced or edited by hand, it's represented in the website and download the data as GIS file. And that GIS file is always up to date. And so we can change how it's made data. You don't have to decide that up front. And also, and also it doesn't even have to be that we load it into Carto DB necessarily. Or if it's right, then it'll be possible to just load the data directly from the website. And the point here is that we can always refine the visualization later.
Right. I guess there's three things I'm talking about, so I'm sorry. I guess it's just the concept of what we need this information for, the database that we're building, and then the visualization. So, anyways, Kate, you made a summary table on your website that did it calculate totals, or did you just write it out as a special static thing, that grayed out table to the right of the screen?
I wrote that out. That was from my calculations from the Excel spreadsheet.
Okay.
But I was able to do it in CartoDB.
And I think that, again, if we're talking about functionality, that might be, if we're talking, it's one of the issues that the Corps of Engineers doesn't do, that they're supposed to, is look at cumulative impacts. And so I think having a visual tool would really help with, getting that idea of cumulative impacts. And so, if there was a functionality to say not only how many are in a particular huck, but also quantity. They would take that and add up all the acres of wetlands that are being impacted in a particular huck in a particular year, or have been so far this year, things like that. So that might help us get at that, and force the Corps' hand a little bit in making them making them do a cumulative impacts analysis, which they don't do.
Right. So that summary table is very useful. Well, it's useful. I think it would be very useful if we could have a display, like a dynamic display. If you clicked on a watershed or a Huck 8, for example, and it summarized permits by that water logic. That is ostensibly what the Army Corps and/or Department of Natural Resources is supposed to be considering when they consider impacts to wetlands. Yeah, cool. But I don't know, something to think about for visualization. So I guess the last thing I wanted to talk about was just, I find this useful from some of our permit comments on these hot spots, and I'm focused on Westlake or west of Lake Charles area. Because it brings up a list of permits I can use for arguments for a programmatic environmental impact statement. These are activities, I mean, they have wetland impacts, obviously, but they're also the same economic impact. They're the same economic activity. So, for example, we have a liquefied natural gas export boom going on in Westlake. So the axial permit, that was one of those orange, or it might have been the red. We have another terminal that James and I were looking at last week. We have the Saysol permit that we talked about. It's not represented on this map, but it would definitely be a red in that same area. And then we have a rail yard, the Mossville rail yard extension in that same area. And just by having this visualization, you know, it would really help me as a comment writer be able to list, here are all the other permits and actions you have taken that mean that this next one means you should have been or should do now a programmatic environmental impact statement. That all of these activities are related and the impact should be assessed together.
Do you know if the community vulnerability index is there like a visual version of that?
There is.
Because I'm just thinking again, kind of going a little bit beyond the scope of this, but that might be another interesting layer to be able to put on top of this. So you could be having your water logic, but also your human or community logic.
Right. I think that's beyond the immediate scope of what we do in the 404 review shop, and it's beyond the scope of the scraper. I just want to be clear.
Yeah.
But certainly it's something that May Wynn at Tulane has brought up that she wants to do. She has that kind of information, and she's interested in working with her folks to compile that other kind of geographic information on race, income. Another statistic we have on the Louisiana coast is percent of people employed in natural resources industry, like fishing. Basically, how many fishermen per capita do you have in your area? So this wetland impact might impact water quality, and that's what we focus on at GRN, but it also might be useful to make a jobs argument that if you mess up the water quality, we will no longer have the recreational fishing jobs available in this watershed. So I think that is useful information. There are, I think, we'll pitch it to May. For how because she's done a lot of thinking, and I think she's going to do more thinking about how this information, how the water logic and the geography of water logic interacts with the geography of social and economic classes and natural resource use.
Yeah, not part of this scope. So So for Tom, Kate, everybody, not part of this.
Hey, this is Jenny. I actually have to run to another meeting, so I'm going to watch the rest of the video later.
Okay. Well,
all right. Thanks,
Jenny. Thanks for participating.
Bye, Jenny.
Yeah, bye, everyone. Thank you.
I'm kind of gone through my agenda. I think I will share out some of the different spreadsheets that have been generated in this process to give those of us working on spreadsheets an idea of what kind of fields are necessary to do this kind of visualization that we've done. But I think I think we're done except for final questions. Does anybody have further questions?
I have a final comment.
Yes.
About the pipeline things. I can't really hear what's happening on the phone call, so I don't know if you mentioned this or not, but if it was possible, it would be a lot better to display them if they could be displayed as their own layer, so that you be the entire length of it. You know, if you just had the start coordinate and the end coordinate, they could easily be drawn as lines and created as their own shape files. So I think either that way as its own layer that you could click on and off, or which could still be impacted via color, although that could make the map kind of the visualization crowded. Or if it was an option, you could display them on their own map to be like, this is a whole certain type of other, these pipeline permits are a huge problem in themselves. Look at their impact spanning across. So I think that could be interesting. I don't know if that's an option to have two visualizations, but it could be a better way to show them.
I think so. They're definitely a large percentage of the wetland impacts. So I think it's worth thinking about. It's a non-trivial problem, so I'm worried about extending what we want to do by the end of the summer. But perhaps, I know that, for example, the Department of Natural Resources displays pipelines as line files in their GIS. So if there's a pipeline permit for DNR, if there's a DNR permit for it, it will generally have a shapefile that lives on the what's called the Sunrise server. I can't think of a way to auto-magically get that. It's a very I can get it right now, but it's a very complicated process I do if I need that shapefile. It involves me going to the site, doing a complicated selection, and then I have to download the entirety of all of the permit lines and then pick out that one in a different GIS, and then I can get it. So it's a non-trivial problem, even though it's
and that might be just something like a side project if we can find somebody that, a GIS person or something like that as a side project that, especially if it's going to be a separate layer, that makes it a little easier to add on to the visualization whenever we get there. But yeah, it sounds like finding ourselves somebody that can devote some brain time and some problem solving to that problem might be.
It would be hard to update on a regular basis, as far as I know, at this point. We'd have to talk with the Department of Natural Resources if there's any way.
So
I don't see it happening. Go back and we'll pull this.
I think it might be a little bit easier to update than you realize.
Okay, well, thanks, Tom. Thank you for the vote of confidence.
But it still might be a bit of work.
I think we agree. Well, I guess maybe something we didn't talk about was in this visualization, Kate, where we briefly touched upon it. You click on the dot and it does bring up certain information, including contact information for the person in charge of reviewing the permit. I think.
No, it's not letting.
Okay. It works
I don't know.
most of the time. I think before we've talked about trying to have some kind of visualization that only displays the active permits that are available for comment. So instead of displaying permits by year, you're displaying them by a different time step. A lot of the Army, I think both classes of permits, both Army Corps and DNR permits, have a due date or a date at which they are no longer receiving comments. So it might be useful to have a column in the database that we're making either automatically or manually about that due date, and then have an option to display permits that are up for comment kind of like a what's new this month that you can engage with citizen or GRN member or person going to the GRN website. Here's what you have the option of commenting on today. And so I think, yeah. But Kate, did that require any special JavaScript or link?
Which one?
You have the BH mitigation LLC, and that anything in that pop-up box require you going outside of part of the
No, I was able to do it all in there. Ideally this link would work, but it's all in, it's all just using CSS in CartoDB.
Okay. And
Oops, yes.
I guess if we wanted to recreate what you've done in CartoDB, is there any way for you to export the JavaScript or what code it is?
Yeah, there's got to be, yes. I mean, I could send you just the JavaScript that's added on this website, which is basically just to make those buttons work.
Okay. Yeah.
That you need to send to you. It's basically just loading the JavaScript library at the top and then some SQL statements in order to have it filtered the way it is. And then as far as CartoDB, I know I should be able to share it, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know when I worked on collaborative projects as part of DB before, we created just a shared email account that then we were all able to access all of the data and look at the guts together. So I don't know if there's I can send you that shared account, and maybe you can replicate what you've done in that shared account if you don't want to.
Yeah, I was going to say, I could add this all onto that account.
Okay, yeah, you probably have that information somewhere.
Yeah, the We Love Wetlands, I think was the past.
We Love Wetlands, yeah.
Yeah, that one, yeah, I have that.
Okay. Cool. All right, well, thanks everyone for being part of this. And I know that other people are going to be watching this and will appreciate the different, just the exploitation of the different things that are going on. Kate's semester project, doing this visualization, GRN's ongoing work, doing manual compiling of the wetlands, and then the scraper program over the summer, trying to automate what we at GRN do, and why you would want to compile that information, and why and how you could visualize it. So, thanks, y'all.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye, Tom. Yeah, I'm here.
One comment. So I guess we'll talk because 10 years ago, but suddenly a bunch of other things came up for me, and
Okay.
I'm gonna do we're gonna do for the whole summer, so probably not gonna do much the next week or two.
Okay. Do you want